further move into the main two topics that we had to study for this analysis, and both of them are fairly easy, so it'll be easy for you to follow. Backward bending supply curve of labor. It may, however, be noted that on theoretical grounds, it cannot be predicted which effect may be stronger. It has, however, been empirically observed that when the wage rate is small, so the demand is more, income a demand for more income or goods and services is very strong, substitution effect is larger than the income effect. So that net effect is, a rise in wage rate will be able to reduce leisure and increase the supply of labor. Okay, so when demand for goods and services essentially leads for you to need more income, because of that the substitution effect is going to be larger, and so with a rise in wage rate you will be working for more hours so as to pay for those goods and services. But when he is already supplying a large amount of labor and is earning sufficient income, further increase in wage rate may induce the individual to demand more leisure, so that income effect may outweigh the substitution effect at higher wage rates. This is the important portion. This is basically the crux of the backward bending supply curve as a whole. This implies that at higher wage rates, labor supply may be reduced in response to further rise in wage rates. Okay, so you're going to reduce labor supply after a certain point when the wage rates are rising. This means up to a point substitution effect is stronger, and the supply curve slopes upward, but higher beyond that higher wage rates supply curve of labor bends backwards. Okay, so if you look at this, to start off with wage rate of W naught, with TM naught budget line, L naught is the amount of work hours that you're giving at Q, which is your point of satisfaction, or your IC, and the budget constraint or the leisure income constraint basically intersect at point Q. So you're supplying TL naught labor initially. Okay, with the greater amount of wage rate, let's say W1, you move on to TM1, and the greater amount of labor L1 is supplied. So now, before this, the level of labor you were supplying was TL not. Now you're going to supply TL1 because the wage rate is now increased. Okay, but amount of labor L1 is directly plotted against the wage rate W1. Okay, so this is, you're plotting this right away. Now, with further increase in wage to W2, labor, the income leisure constraint rotates to TM2. Okay, and the individual is in equilibrium when he supplies L2 work hours. Okay, now the work hours are actually reducing, which is smaller than L1, okay, which was your initial increase. Thus, with the rise in wages above W1, labor supply decreases. In other words, up to wage rate W1, labor supply curve slopes upwards. Okay, so till this you see that it was sloping upwards, but now beyond that it's going to start to bend. Okay, which means that you're going to start to reduce the amount of labor after a certain level of increase in your wage rates. Okay, let's come on to the food stamp program or in-kind food subsidy. Food stamp program is a type of food subsidy to provide poor people with adequate quantity of food. It is a form of in-kind food subsidy that contrasts to the subsidy provided in form of cash. Okay, so this is an in-kind food subsidy, not cash income that is given to you. Okay, in United States, this was introduced in 1964 and was amended in 1979, and since then it continues there as an amended form. In India, also, food stamp program has been suggested in recent years as an anti-poverty measure. Under food stamp program, some stamps or coupons are given to eligible persons or households, With these stamps, the recipient can buy food and only food. That is, these food stamps cannot be used to buy non food goods. Further, these stamps cannot be traded or transferred to other people. Let us explain how a receipt of food stamp affects the budget line, consumption of food, and welfare of the individual. We will also demonstrate how the effect of food stamp subsidy differs from cash subsidy. Okay, consider figure 11.19, where along the x-axis we measure quantity of food and on y-axis we measure money, which represents all other goods, that is goods other than food, with a given so you have food, just like the two good uh, two good plots that we've been doing, or the, one good and other goods plot that we've been doing. This is the same case. With a given income of individual and given market price of food, B1 L1 is a budget line whose slope represents the price of food. Okay. On the y-axis is rupees 1, that is price of rupee 1 is rupee 1. Okay, so this is the budget line. Okay, OB1 is the given money income of the individual. Okay, OB1 is the given money income of the individual. Before the receipt of food stamps, the individual is in equilibrium at point E1. Okay, because this was the level of income that he had. Oh, I'm sorry. B1 L1 is the initial budget line. Sorry, yeah. B1 L1 is the initial budget line. OB1 is the given money income of the individual. Before the receipt of food stamps, the individual is in equilibrium at E1, because this is the highest IC curve that he can reach on given his budget constraint. And is consuming OF1 of food, because x axis is the plot of food, y axis is the plot of other goods. OF1 of food is what is consuming at the equilibrium level E, and ON1 is the quantity of other goods per week. Okay, now suppose the individual is given food stamps worth 200 per week, which he can spend on food alone. Okay, suppose further that price of food is rupees 10 per kg. With the stamps of rupees 200, he can therefore buy 20 kgs of food, right? 200 divided by 10, because the price per kg is 10, and 200 is the amount of worth of the food stamps, basically. Okay, so 20 kgs of food that the person can buy per se. Since the consumer cannot use food stamps to buy non-food items, which is other goods, he cannot spend more than that, more than his initial income OB1 on other goods. Okay, so he can spend only this level OB1 on other goods. He cannot spend beyond it. Okay. Uh, Thus, above the horizontal line B1C1, this one, the combination of other goods and food are not attainable when he is given food stamps of 200 rupees. Suppose at the given market price of food, he can buy B1C1 amount of food with the food stamps of rupees 200 provided to him. Okay, so now he is getting a level of what, B1C amount of food, uh, B1C amount of food, B1C amount of food with the food stamps of rupees 200 provided to him, while spending his entire income OB1 on other goods, and OB1 is spent on other goods. Okay. Uh, for instance, if the price of food is rupees 10 per kg, then with 200 he can buy 20 kgs of food. In this case, therefore, B1C will be equal to 20 kg. Okay. Uh, if the individual wants to buy more food grain than B1C, he will have to spend some part of his initial income to purchase the additional food. So, if he wants more food, he has to spend the initial some of the initial income that he had. Since the food stamps are in addition to his initial income of OB1, his budget line with food stamps becomes a kinged line, B1CL2. uh, his budget line with food stamps becomes a king line, B1CL2. Okay, B1CL2, because all of these are unattainable. The food stamp program can affect the recipient in two ways. One possibility is that with the food stamp subsidy and resultant kinged budget line B1CL2, in figure 11.19, the individual maximizes satisfaction at point E2. Now he can maximize his satisfaction at point E2, whereas budget line is tangent to the IC indifference curve IC2. At this new equilibrium point E2, he is purchasing OF2 level of food, okay, OF2 level of food and ON2 level of other goods. Thus, as compared to the situation prior to the food subsidy, he is on higher IC, showing a greater level of satisfaction or welfare and consuming greater quantities of food and other goods. Thus, food stamp subsidy has led him to buy not only more food but also more of other goods. Okay, because when he was buying other goods, he was buying ON1 level of other goods. Now he's buying ON2 level of other goods. Okay. Initially, he was buying OF1 level of food. Now he's buying OF2 level of food. So both food and other goods have basically increased. This means that stamp subsidy has been indirectly used for financing the purchase of non-food commodities. It is important to note that in this possible case, the effect of food stamp subsidy is exactly the same as would be in case of cash subsidy is granted to the individual. Okay, the effect is same as cash subsidy was essentially do. Thus, if instead of food stamps the individual is given cash income of B1 B2, okay, if he is given a cash income of B1 B2 extra, note that with the given market price of cash, food cash income B1 B2 can buy B1C quantity of food, and thus the two are equivalent. Okay, yeah, so it's going to buy B1C level of food, right? uh, Quantity of food, and thus the two are equivalent. The budget line will shift from B1 L1 to B2 L2. So B1 L1 to B2 L2, because you will have this amount of money now. Okay, but given the preferences of the individual between food and other goods, he is in equilibrium at the same point E2. He will still be in equilibrium at the level E2 because of his preferences. At his budget line B2 L2 is tangent to the IC2. Thus, in this possibility, the effect of equivalent cash subsidy is exactly the same as in case of food subsidy, which we said initially, right? This happens because the preferences of the individual between food and other commodities are such that he wants to have more than B1 C1 quantity of food, which is the quantity of food provided under the food stamp. So it's basically because of preferences, because he prefers to have that much food, that the resultant outcome is basically the same in either of the cases. Another important conclusion is possible cases that with either food stamp subsidy or cash subsidy, the individual buys more of both food. So in either of the cases, he's just buying more food and other goods than he would buy otherwise. This is because food and other goods are here considered as normal goods whose quantity demanded increases with the increase in income. The second possibility of the effect of food stamp subsidy is given in this case 11.20. Prior to the grant of subsidy and given budget line B1L1, the individual is in equilibrium at point E1. Okay, so this is the budget constraint and he is said to be in equilibrium at E1. Now let us assume that he's given the cash subsidy of B1 B2, so that now he's given cash. So this also signifies money, right? So he's getting B1 B2 level of money extra. Uh, so that with the given market price of food, budget line shifts to B2 L2. The individual's preferences between food and other goods are such that with this cash subsidy, the individual is in equilibrium at point H. So his preferences between food and other goods is such that with this cash subsidy, so because he's getting the cash subsidy of B1 B2, because of this increase in money that he has, uh, the individual is in equilibrium at point H. Okay, at this level H, where the budget line B2 L2 is tangent to the IC curve IC3. In this case, with cash subsidy, the individual spends more than his initial income OB1 on other goods. Right? So he's going to spend this much level. So this is more than OB1 level, right? Uh, as noted above, combination H is not available under food stamp subsidy because food stamps cannot be used to purchase other goods. Right, so we said that this is actually a blacked out space in case of food subsidies, so you can't have an IC here. but because it's a cash subsidy, you can have an IC here, and you H will be attainable. H is not attainable in food stamp subsidy because food stamps cannot be used to purchase other goods, and this essentially means that you're buying more other goods as well. So this is the level of goods that you would be buying if you were on this IC or point H in equilibrium. With equivalent food stamp subsidy of B1C, the individual has to choose a point which must be on the kinked budget line B1C L2. So you would have to choose a B1C L2 point somewhere in this area. Okay, with the budget line B1C L2 with the food stamp subsidy, the best that the individual can do is to choose the counterpoint C, right? So the highest you can go is, this is the place that the highest you can go, the maxed out for both the goods, okay? Which lies on the highest possible IC2 passing through the point C, okay, this level. Therefore, from the point of individual welfare, we reach our earlier conclusion that cash subsidy is superior to in-kind subsidy represented by the food stamps program. This is because cash subsidy does not limit a person so that he must purchase a certain amount of food and he is therefore free to spend as he likes. But it should be noted that the consumption of food in case of cash subsidy is less than under the stamp subsidy program. If the purpose is to increase the consumption of food and therefore provide adequate diet to the people, then the food stamp subsidy is going to be better. So if you're struggling with malnutrition as a country or something like that, and you want people to have some kind of adequate diet, then this is better because it forces people to buy more food. But otherwise, the initial individual is constrained to buy some food, so it's basically limiting the person, uh, and he cannot buy more of the other goods that he wants. Another important, so basically he won't be at a higher IC. If you see, IC3 is higher than the IC2, and IC2 is a max that you can reach in case of um, food stamp subsidy program. Another important result obtained from our above analysis that even with food stamp program, the individual increases the consumption of all other goods. Okay, so even with food stamps program, his consumption of all other goods is also increasing. We saw this, right? So we just discussed that N1 N2 is basically more, is the gap, the plus gap, so positive gap. F1 F2 similarly was a positive gap, right? So this shows that a part of the food stamp subsidy is indirectly used to finance the increased consumption of other goods. This is because some part of the income which the individual was spending on food prior to food stamp subsidy gets released. So yeah, this is intuitive, and it's explained here in case you did not understand why that was the case. It's because the amount of food that you're getting now is more because of the food stamp subsidy, so you have extra money left over from the money that you had initially. Okay, so this money gets released because of the food stamp being used for this purchase, and its released income is spent on non-food items. This increases the consumption of non-food items also. This result is of special importance because supporters of food stamp subsidy have been emphasizing that food subsidy should not be used to finance any part of non-food unnecessary items such as liquor. However, as seen above, in practice, it is difficult to make a plan that would increase the consumption of subsidized food and will not affect the consumption of other goods. So, basically, what we're saying is that if your main focus is to increase the amount of food that is being consumed and non-food items are not to be purchased at all, it's impossible to be achieved because people will have extra income left over in their hands. Real income would actually increase, and so they'll be able to buy more of other items as well. Lastly, out of the two possibilities of the effects of food stamp subsidy and cash subsidy, which is the most common result, that is, the most common outcome of the two possible cases presented in 11.19 and 11.20. However, the final result of the two types of subsidies depends on the value of the food stamp relative to the preferences and incomes of the individual whom subsidies are granted. We cannot predict the specific result purely on theoretical grounds. Empirical research conducted in USA, however, reveals that most recipients of food stamp program represent situation depicted in 11.20. Okay, That means for most of the recipients, food stamp program has had the same effect as cash subsidy. We can't be sure, but yes, that is the case. Okay. uh, like, why is this said at all? Why it depends on preference, income, individuals who subsidies are granted? I can give you one example, is that let's say the person did not have any initial income at all. Okay, in that case, he will not be able to increase the amount of food and other goods that he is purchasing. Okay, in that case, he will just have whatever the food stamp program allows him to have. Okay, so that is what they mean by income of the individuals, preferences, uh, all of that. Okay, so yes, the actual cases might differ, but what they are concluding with is that most of the recipients, food stamp program has had the same effect as the cash subsidy program essentially would. Okay, uh, these are two very important topics when it comes to especially a prep for CUET PG, and I hope that you will be able to read into both of these in a much easier way now that they're explained and read into in front of you. Thank you so much for your time. Have a nice one.